So continuing with the story of Esther, we covered how that King Ahasuerus had gotten rid of his wife because she was disobedient. He called for her and she disobeyed. And again, he's the king. This isn't just a little thing. It's also, it would lead other women into disobeying and disdaining their husbands. So he passed this law, and he got rid of Vashti. He comes to this idea of setting up this kind of competition where the women who wanted to be could come in, and he would pick from that crowd. And amongst them, he would pick some of the most beautiful ones and have them go through a year of beautification, purification, education. They had their own maidservants, they had their own servants, they had chamberlains that came and did things for them. They were given oil baths, they were given a good, proper diet. They were taught information, taught poise, etiquette, maybe, common courtesies, but also strength. A queen has to be strong. A queen has to have an understanding. A queen really has to rule that household. You're not just the hostess. You are in charge of what happens there. It's very strong to be a queen here. So after the things when his wrath was appeased, the king's servants and ministers said, "Let fair young virgins be sought for the king." And he sent out officers to the house that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan, and let their purification be given unto them. And let the maiden that pleased the king be queen instead of Vashti, and this thing blessed the king. And so, now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew named Mordecai, and he had with him a young woman named Hadassah. Hadassah is his younger cousin. Her uncle and his aunt, his uncle and his aunt, which was the fathers of Hadassah, who is known as Esther, had died, and Mordecai took her under his wing. And again, when we're looking at where this is in history, let me pick this up. We see that, again, that's in this area here, around 480 BC. Once again, in the reign, starting in the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, right after Darius, we see this happening. And so the idea is that he's going to set up this competition, and the women will come in, and the one that pleases him most. And so it isn't just in kind of physical pleasing, but it's also in decorum, in demeanor, probably also in education, in timbre, in loyalty, all these other things that a king would need a queen to be. And like I said, I don't know how he picked Vashti. Maybe he was too quick on the trigger there. But he sets this up. And like I said, there was a word in here, gathered, comes up. So it came to pass that the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan. I looked up the word gathered there. They were not herded against their will. If anything, this was a common call. Anyone who Shushan, and probably in the little area there, or wanted to travel there, could go and be in this competition for queen. And so he didn't just herd them up and force them and compel them. Remember, it says that he did not compel the people to drink at his banquet. So he's not forcing these women. The word gathered there, again, if you look it up into the Hebrew and you look it up at the terms, it is passive voice. It's not active voice. Active voice, if I was going to go gather grapes, it's an active voice. If I'm going to gather up hens by just opening the door and see which ones walk out, I'm gathering, but they're choosing to go out. So Hadassah didn't have a mother or a father, and her uncle Mordecai was taking care of her, and she went into this place, and Mordecai went to visit her at the gate every day. They had this place where the chamberlain had taken all these women in a compound for purification, for education, and Hadassah was brought among the king's house in the custody of Haggai, the keeper, and the maiden pleased him and obtained kindness from him, and speedily gave the things for purification, and was given 7 maidens. They were all given maidens. Maybe she was given more, but 7 maidens were here to take care of her. Esther did not show of what her lineage was, of who she was. She didn't show that she was a Jew. And Mordecai walked every day to the court to make sure she was okay. And again, he would have to go through the king's court and through the king's gate to get there. And now it was a maid's turn to come and go to the king after she had had 12 months, according to the matter of women. For so there were days of purifications accomplished, 6 months of oil and myrrh, 6 months of sweet odors, and 6 months of purifying and other things for purifying the women. So they spent 6 months in the oil, 6 months in the foods. They had these 6 months, and for 1 year, you get the idea that maybe they ran these women through like 10 at a time or something like that, and each of them had a year to participate, or maybe 20 at a time. It doesn't say how many, if I'm looking back to see. But he brought all these maidens in and took care of them, and each one of them would get a chance in a year. And thus every maiden went unto the king whatsoever she desired given to her to go in and out of the house of the women to the king's house. And in the evening she went in, and in the morning she returned unto the second house of the women in the custody of the chamberlain, which held the concubine. She came in unto the king no more, except he delighted in her. So she would go, gussy herself up, make herself pretty, but also prepare herself how she wanted to present herself. She wasn't given robes. She put on her robes. She picked her garments. She picked her jewelry. She picked her hairstyle. She picked everything for herself, how she wanted to present herself. And the king backed all of that. You get to present yourself how you see yourself, how you see fit to become this queen. So we have that. When it was Esther's turn, like I said, who had from Mordecai, her turn to go in, she required nothing but what the chamberlain had brought her, and obtained favor in the sight of all of them that looked upon her. She didn't go with the lavish. She went with something traditional, nice, clean, proper, and she pleased the king so well that she was taken to King Ahasuerus in the 10th month, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace. And he made a great feast for Esther. Esther was now going to be queen. He chose her because of who she was, who she chose to be, and the strength of her character and her beauty. We tend to throw beauty under the bus in Christianity. Who cares if you're physically beautiful? Most of the women in the Bible were very physically beautiful. They weren't just beautiful. They were beautiful because they had a beautiful lifestyle. They didn't just eat all the junky food of the Canaanites. They just didn't eat and participate in things that created diseases, and they didn't have this haughty face and this anger about everything and always wanting her way. Here she had more of a softness and a genteel, a feminine spirit of loyalty and all these things. I'm reading into it, of course, but to really get the attention of a king, you got to have more than a pretty face and nice legs. You've got to really have your stuff on the ball. But there's nothing wrong with being as physically beautiful in the outside as you can. So she becomes this, and the king made a great feast, and the virgins gathered together the second time, and Mordecai sat at the gate, and she still hadn't shown who she was. In those days Mordecai sat at the gate, and he heard that 2 of the chamberlains wanted to lay hands on the king and kill him, and she passes this to Esther. Esther passes this to the king. The king looks into the situation, finds out it's so, and has the 2 men killed. So that's an important point there. In those times, there was also the king, like I said, he created these men under him who would do his work in his name, nobles and princes, and one of them was named Haman. He was an Agite, and there were princes under him, so he was one of the higher management guys, and he had lower management guys who did things under him, but he hung around with his friends. I'm reading kind of in there because it makes sense that birds of a feather would flock together. And the king's servants there, they bowed and reverenced Haman. Everybody reverenced Haman when he came by through the gate. But here's Mordecai wanting to talk and wait to talk with Esther, and he does not bow. He's the only one not bowing. You can imagine as Haman is coming to a gate, he's walking past the crowd. Mordecai is waiting for Esther. Everybody bows, and Mordecai doesn't bow. And Haman seems to know that he's a Jew. And he goes, why do you transgress the king's commandment? And they came past daily, and he hearkened not unto them. And they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matter would stand, for he had told him that he was a Jew. So he told him he was a Jew, and that he didn't bow before any other man. And Haman had a problem with this. And they knew that he bowed not, so he would take scorn, and he wanted to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for he showed him that the people of Mordecai, therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. So here he wants to destroy all the Jews for the action of one. And here you've got this happening. The Haman is now angry, and we're talking about millions of people spread out in this area. Some of them in pockets here, pockets there. But he wants, and they're all over the place in their little pockets. And he wants to wipe them all out because this Mordecai will not bow before him. And so on the first day of the month, Nisan, he cast a lot from day to day and month to month, and he picked a day that he would destroy the Jews. And so Haman, he picked a day in the 12th month, which is Adar, and he was going to kill the Jews in the 12th year and the 12th month. So they had till basically our December. He did this in Nisan. In the month of Nisan, I think it's on the 13th, he set up, and it was going to be on the 13th of Adar, at the end of the year, that he would let everyone kill the Jews. They were going to be open season. There was no protection for the Jews. So Haman goes to the king, and there's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people, and their laws are diverse from all the people, and neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. Now he's kind of pulling this out of context, just like we saw Sanballat and Tobias. They're pulling things out of context. There isn't this great uprising. It's one guy, but he's making this sound like it's going to be all of them. And he doesn't even say who they are. Had he mentioned it was the Jews, probably things wouldn't have gone the way they went, because it seems like that, like I said, these other kings seem to have a lot of respect. At this time also, the Jews had gone back to the land. Remember, that's part of this context, is many of the Jews had gone back to the land with the king's permission to rebuild Jerusalem, or to rebuild the temple. So that's happening at this time. There are actually Jews living in the Jerusalem proper at the request of Cyrus and Darius. So we have to remember that's in play here. Ezra and Nehemiah will come later after this, but Zerubbabel and Yeshua and these men are already there, and the temple has been built, and now they're participating in worship. So this is happening while Esther and Mordecai are in Shushan. So Haman is going against them to wipe out all the Jews in the 127 provinces. And if it pleased the king, and the king took his ring and gave it to Haman, and Haman the Haggite, he wrote out with the scribes on the 13th day of the first month. It was written according to all that Haman had commanded the king's lieutenants and the governors of every province, and he wrote in every language. He wrote letters that were on post to the provinces to destroy and to kill and to perish all Jews, both young and old, men and women, in one day. That was on the 13th day of the 12th month. That was Adar. And a copy of this writing commandment was given to every province. And the post went out, being hastened by the king's command, and the decree was given in Shushan. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city was perplexed. I like what it says, the city was perplexed. I don't think the writing of this fit with who I always pronounce his name wrong. Ahasuerus was. They're perplexed. Why would the king write something that destroys an entire people? This doesn't sound like him. So it's interesting how they word perplexed there. But we see that the gist of the story is that Haman wants to run his own show. He's full of himself. He's under the king. One person won't bow, and because that one person won't bow, he wants to destroy all of those people. And he goes and stretches the truth and gets the king to give him the ring, and he writes this command to destroy these people and to destroy all the Jews. And I don't know what Ahasuerus knows about this, that he sent out this, that it's going to destroy the Jews. Maybe he's got other things going on and this doesn't meet his radar. But everyone knows and are perplexed now. I get the feel from this, and I'm reading into a lot in Esther, and you guys can kind of catch me on that, because I've always been a grid work kind of guy. But in a narrative, you can kind of play a little bit with license. I'm not changing the story. I'm kind of imbibing into it a little bit, so we can see some of the nuances, some of the characterizations, some of the connections, some of the consistencies, some of the patterns. So we have, again, if the people are perplexed, why would they be perplexed? If they saw edicts going out to wipe out people all the time by the king, that wouldn't be a problem. But all of a sudden, there's this great big push that at the end of the year, this one group gets to be destroyed. Doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound like the king. So it's interesting how we're going to stop here. This narrative goes on, of course. I don't have time to go into the rest of it today, but there's a lot to this. But here he has, on the 12th day of the month, in Adar, that he's going to wipe out the people. So I like the story. Read the story. Kind of enjoy the story. Let your mind wander in. Build yourself something of Haman, or build yourself something of Mordecai. Visualize Esther. See what's happening. Read the story and enjoy it. But God is going to be working underneath, and that's the most important thing also. No matter what the enemies are doing on top, here God is working underneath. We need to find out what God is doing underneath when it looks like things are tough, looks like things are getting hard. He's still underneath. How can we participate with God? That's where Mordecai and Esther will be going. They're not going to make God do something. They're not going to go in faith and just pick something and have God bless it. Actually, they're going to find out what God is doing. And like Mordecai is later going to tell Esther, maybe you were put in this place for this reason. If you don't, somebody else will, because God will save the Jews because of his promises. But you will just be left out of it. So let's not give up. Let's be like Mordecai and Esther. So we're going to see more of this story and see the wonderful workings of God behind the scenes. It's always good to see him do this. Thank you.